Sustain 267.
Welcome to the Sustain 267 podcast, where we host conversations with Africans on climate change, the environment, and sustainability in Botswana and the rest of Africa. I am your host, Patukili Sitsi. After a very long break, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Season 3 of the Sustain 267 podcast. We hope during the break you had time to catch up on our last 40 episodes that we've published to date. And since then, a lot has happened. We now have a YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our channel. And we are on LinkedIn, so let's connect. Please also check out our Patreon page for other updates on what we've been up to since we've been away. Today's episode is another first for us. This is the first episode we have recorded live and in person. It was recorded at the Climate Action Network International Annual Strategy Meeting in Bali, Indonesia. For this episode, I am in conversation with Gambian-born global human rights and environmental rights activist Muhammed Lamin Saidy. Muhammad established and led the largest Pan-African movement of movements in Africa and the diaspora called Africans Rising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity for almost 6 years, then moved to Climate Action Network International, where he currently serves as the head of building movement power. In 2016, Muhammed Lamin and his colleagues organized a widespread protest to get long-term Gambian dictator Yahya Jammeh to step down, a success that followed many years of his work with young people and women through training and nonviolent organizing for social change. Lamin was one of the leaders of the Women's Land Rights Campaign and the famous climb of women to the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro for their land rights in 2015. He was awarded the Pan-African Advocate of the Year in 2018 and named one of the 100 most influential young people leaders in Africa in 2019. Our conversation was inspired by a comment, or rather a strong statement, that Muhammad made at the meeting. He called for African climate justice activists to be organized, for them to be more visible. A large part of his work is organizing. My first question was, why is it important to organize as climate justice activists?
Without organizing, then we'll be disorganized. And then if you want to create an impact in any field that you work in, especially climate, which needs an urgent organizing and action for us to save many lives and save our lives ourselves. So in that process, it is critical for us to organize and channel our demands that must be rooted from the grassroots and the needs of the grassroots people that we fight for or work for, to be able to effect serious policy change and system change, systematic changes that will transform lives and, bring dignity to the lives of people that we fight for. That climate catastrophes and the effects of climate change is kind of almost stealing and destroying lives and stealing dignity from the people.
As you were talking about organizing, I was like, actually, one may take it for granted that we know what organizing is, but what is organizing? What does organizing look like when it's successful? When we say we're organizing for climate justice, what does that look like?
Yeah, one can view this or see this in different forms. But a simple, explanation one could give to this is, one thing that is clear is that the systems that are supposed to give, dignity and equality and justice, a just society, are failing to deliver, that just society that every person lives in a life of dignity. So when systems failed, the consequences becomes catastrophic, because then a lot of people lose their lives through the effects of system failure. So the citizenry that all the leaders are serving must be organized so that they can bring their voices together, they can bring the power together and speak in one common voice and put their demands together. So then they can transform their own lives by taking the power that they have given to the authorities to lead them. In my organizing work, you can view organizing in different angles, through online, means of people coming together and speaking one voice, but also through offline, organizing, through meetings, through capacity building, awareness raising, so that people can be aware. When people don't know about your challenge, they cannot be in solidarity and they will never join your fights. So that popular education, awareness creation, to bring that people's level to a level that they should be able to act and ignite them so that they know that their destiny is in their own hands. One thing that is critical that I know is that our leaders, especially on the African continent, listen to two things critically. One is numbers. When we have numbers, the leadership fears that if they don't act on our interests, on our requests, on our demands, they will lose the privileges and the space and the position that they have that they have been given because the numbers put them there. But the other thing is media. Media informs and educates people, and we have it in our hands, like the social media. It's in our hands. So when people organize themselves through media and educate and inform people, that media can transform them to take action. We have seen, activists like myself and others have used media effectively to get organized and educate people and use it as a tool to mobilize for people to take action. So media is a very powerful tool because it informs, it educates, it mobilizes quickly, it kind of builds power for action.
When you talk about what organizing is, it's basically taking the power that we have individually and consolidating it to create almost a superpower, people's wants, people's demands, and in that then balancing that power between, let's say, the people and our political leaders, the people and institutions, the people and, I guess, those who we've given the power to make certain decisions for us. And then you mentioned something else, systems change. What is systems change? Firstly, what is it? Secondly, what does it look like? And we keep hearing people advocating for it. Why do we need it?
The world is run and controlled by systems. So, the food system, one could say, everybody will need to eat. The energy system, everybody needs light, they need electricity to survive and feed on. The education system that build the mindset in terms of how we direct our work and how we direct our, human civilization. The health system, everybody depends on that. So if these systems are not working for humanity, then humanity suffers. So, but unfortunately, what have been happening is these systems have escaped from the hands of these ordinary citizens. It went into the hands of the few. They decide on the price of the commodities, the food. They decide on the price of the electricity. They decide on the price of how the environment will be structured because they're in charge of the land distribution. They're in charge of the health systems. You can see even during the COVID pandemic. Some people who are making the vaccines control it. They decide who should be vaccinated first and who should be vaccinated next. So I don't know, the systems are in the hands of few elites that remote control the world. We as organizers believe that we must disrupt the systems so that then the systems will be transformed and then they will work for humanity to live in life of dignity and be able to survive. So it's about life, it's about survival. So in organizing, we have what we call pillars of support. And these pillars of support put, the monarchy or the oppressor on top of the pyramid. So all of these systems that support and breathe and, feed that monarchy to oppress us. If we dismantle the system that the monarchy or the oppressor is surviving on, we will crumble this monarchy, and then eventually people can build alternative systems of survival.
That makes sense. So from right now where the economy is serving the very few, not even the economy, I just think everything really is serving the very few. And what comes to mind is something that I saw very recently, a few weeks ago, I think, international oil companies were reporting their profits. And it's like ridiculous amounts of money when the whole world is suffering. And it's like, are people making that much money in the same world where people can barely eat? So when you talk about it's the system.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. It's the energy system that is now being captured by corporates. So if you don't have money, you don't have electricity. If you don't have money, you cannot even cook, because then your cooking is based on electricity. It's based on gas. So these are controlled by these big multinational companies that have been mostly owned and run by people from the global north or governments from the global north. And then the sad thing is they depend, and there is a whole ugly phase of fossil fuel extraction being expanded on the African continent and many developing countries, in the global south, that they will be extracting and advancing the extraction of oil and gas and coal to be able to, advance their survival. And this is very life-threatening, because the moment they started these explorations and advanced stages, it destroyed completely our livelihood on the continent. It dismantled, it kicked out people, evict people from their communities, it polluted our environment. All of that affects to all the different patterns of our changes of patterns in our rainy season. And then, we all know that Africans depend, and the global south people depends on farming. If rains are disrupted, they come up with flood. Last year, we know what happened in South Africa. As we speak today, recently, a few days ago, over 30,000 people died in Turkey and Syria. These are all, cause failures of systems that are supposed to be serving people. When governments allow, a few individuals to be in charge and to be controlling how systems are directed, how systems are controlled, then we lose the equality completely in society. The dignity of people are, normally wiped out by the effects of system failure. Looking into climate change becomes more advanced in terms of how society has been destroyed because of all of that. All of those system failures and corruption comes into being a big player, because people have to eat, they have to go through the back doors to have certain services. So it causes a lot of other damages on the lives of the ordinary citizens.
I was having a conversation with someone last week around that whole thing of, you have to go through back doors to get certain things. For you to get basic amenities, to be recognized as a human, to be afforded certain dignities, you have to have a certain amount in your bank account, which is really not right. So you're a Pan-Africanist. You are a climate justice activist. So when it comes to justice, a conversation I'm sure you've had a lot of times, because also you just touched on oil and don't oil Africa. The age-old conversation of how can you not gas and oil Africa when we've got energy poverty, and connect that to justice when the African people need energy and they need to advance, and they're carrying on their backs the bill of many, many years of the developed countries. How do we then balance that thing of we're advocating for climate justice, but in that way, we're also saying Africa, who still needs to develop, shouldn't use their oil and gas?
Yeah, I think campaigners are not saying that we should not use completely oil and gas without a proper transition, just transition in that aspect of, moving from fossil fuel dependency to renewable energy dependency. I know I'm very aware and very clear, and I'm in solidarity with over 600 million Africans who are really seeking for energy and looking for energy, live in serious energy poverty. This is very clear and evident. But one thing that we are saying is very clear as campaigners is that, the Ukraine-Russia war cannot be used as a tool to come and destroy Africa's resources or Africa's environment. And that highly depends on agriculture. When we know if we increase the investments of the exploration of gas and oil and coal in Africa to a certain level, the effects of climate change will be so detrimental to the African communities, and then the farming communities will suffer the burden. I will tell you an example. I'm coming from a very small country called the Gambia. when I used to be young, they used to grow this rice and then they used to feed themselves. But right now, as we speak, the village cannot even produce a bag of rice. So everything is being destroyed with all these effects of climate change. If there's no flood this year, there'll be drought. If there's no drought this year, there'll be flood. So we live in that kind of a serious dilemma of we don't know what is going to be the pattern of rain that people depend on. So what we are saying is there's a need and a clarity around how Africa can take the journey of transitioning into more green and renewable energy. But again, directing our investments to benefit Africans. We don't want to be used as the gas bank of Europe, gas to be extracted in Africa, coal and oil to be extracted in Africa, and it's going down to feed the Europeans or the global north. We Africans must benefit from all these investments. We are blessed. We are the most blessed continent in terms of natural resources, but we cannot see the benefits. We cannot just see the effects of this investment on the lives of Africans.
I guess then that's where the just element of the transition comes in, where, okay, but if we're going to continue to oil and gas in the way that we have been, we're going to get the bad environments that we can't even grow food in. We're not even going to get the profits, which means we're not even going to get development in the country. It's just going to be a continuation of extraction. But going back to the conversation of organizing, there's a saying that says nothing organizes like tyranny, because tyranny organizes. If you look at systems and evil systems, oppressive systems, the way they are designed, the way they are architectured, if the results weren't so ugly, there'd be something to marvel at. We can't always assume that when we organize, we're organizing for good. As we organize, what principles as individuals, if we decide to be organizers, as organizations, as collectives, as communities, as we organize, what principles do you think we need to center around our organizing and always remember?
Yeah, organizing have to be based on hope. We cannot be just fighting for nothing. We must be hopeful that the tomorrow is going to be great and then nobody will come from anywhere to deliver, justice for you or to deliver the Africa we want or the Zimbabwe we want or the Botswana we want. We have to be, as citizens of those countries of Africa, deliver, dignity for ourselves. And then that cannot be done in silos. It has to be done in a collective effort. So that's why principle of solidarity is very critical, that we cannot just allow ourselves to be divided into different fractions of movements. We need to really see our fights as a fight for social justice and climate justice or racial justice. These are evidence that every African, in some way or the other, is grumbling with or is dealing with. The principle of, cohesive and dedicated commitment towards this fight is critical. And we need to have values like courage. We must be courage. We must be courageous in a way that we should be able to, confront when we need be. But we should be tactical in terms of using other approaches when we think that dialogues is the best approach for us to win faster. So as organizers, there are certain basic principles of humility that every activist need to have. One of our great, Pan-Africanists said this, and then encouraging us to be more human and then, not to, praise ourselves too much. And then, the capital, is a great inspiration for many Africans, said, never lie, but also be aware that, you don't want to blow your own trumpet too much by, announcing your victories or be very proud of your victories too much. Know that the fight, you will win certain elements of the fight, but then this will serve as a motivation for you to be able to step on, for bigger wins that are out there. Because if we are too proud of ourselves without having an element of humility, then we will lose the battle, because then we will be seeing ourselves as a champion, while it's not you as an individual, but it's the community that you fight for that create the number, because you as a person cannot create the number. So if I conclude this by summarize this point by saying that, when you look at one stick of broom, you can easily break it, but when you put brooms together, you can never break a bunch of sticks of brooms easily. So that's how we need to be organized. We need to be that web that connects our forces together so that we can sweep any debt or any injustices that is in front of us to deliver ourselves dignity.
And I think in addition to, if you've got a collection of sticks of brooms, if one falls, you've still got many standing. And that's been a sticky point for me in terms of where we give the movement a human face. We're humans. We won't be perfect. And with every imperfection of that person, then we're extending that to the movement. But on principles, hope, dignity, and humility. And I think the one that you really went into was humility quite a bit. And then as we end our conversation, this just seems like a lot. I work in the climate justice space, and it's overwhelming. You see sometimes just the worst in humanity because you need to read so much. You meet people who are going through so much, who, when they talk about you need to act on climate, are talking about, I've lost, the only thing I still have left is my life. And then on the other side, you meet people who are tackling climate because they're like, well, it makes sense for me to be sustainable because that's the only way for me to keep making these kind of profits. And then you're talking systems change, and systems are so deeply embedded. You're talking politics. Just having this conversation, it sounds overwhelming. It sounds like a lot to do. Trying to bring people in, organize them to do one thing when people just always want to do their own thing. Why did you choose this? Why did you choose to dedicate yourself to this?
Yeah, we're at a critical point in life that every African or global citizen need to live for a purpose. When you look at this social justice, climate justice, or racial justice fight, you realize that we don't have time. It's almost done. Incidents is happening every day, from left, right, and center. Our brothers and sisters are dying from the catastrophes of system failures. So if we don't act now, then what are you living for? That's why, it's critical for us to join organizations that will strengthen organizing and take leadership in those organizations to be able to, coordinate efforts and power, so that then people will realize that the potential that they have, they will realize the power that they have, and can transform societies by themselves by holding leaders accountable, and those who are not really acting on the demands and requests from people, they can be confronted heavily through non-violence actions and violence organizing, but through dialogues as well and policy advocacy to be able to transform lives. Because if you don't transform the systems right now, these catastrophes will continue to hit us harder and bad. So we have to take the mantle of leadership in this space in our hands, and then know that we all have a moment to live in this life. We must be able to leave a mark, so that generations will know that you have not failed when it's time for you to act.
Thank you so much. And then in closing, we've had quite a conversation. We've touched on a lot. So if someone's listening to our conversation, what would your call to them be? So as an individual, but individuals make up organizations. So your call to organizations, possibly your call to governments, and then lastly, global. So your call, what can people do right now after listening to this?
We have to unify our forces together as people. We should know that one person cannot win a revolution, one person cannot bring change. It has to be us together to unify our forces so that we can build that power that transforms society for all of us to live in life of dignity.
Collaborate and partnerships. What would organizations do to get us closer to organizing?
Organizations need to come down to the grassroots. They need to come down and connect their work to the grassroots, because all what they're doing is to, claiming to be fighting for people that need to be manifested in their work. We should be able to link our grassroots work and advocacy and campaigns to policy work. Linking it to global system change policy processes that will transform society. So organizations must be realistic and know that the solutions is in the hands of the people, and then they need to be rallied behind the people for the transformation and give them all the necessary support and guidance for the transformation to be real.
Governments.
Governments are created for equality. So they need to deliver. And then they must collaborate, especially African governments need to collaborate so that all these unjust investments that are coming to the continent, for them to dismantle this, ugly global north systems that have been controlling Africa before independence, from colonial time to now. One thing that is critical that we need to know is that we have to unify our investments and our development agendas as people in the global south, but especially in Africa. It's very sad that we are still divided. We cannot still go to each other freely. We cannot still use, similar economic systems. I will conclude by saying, if Europe can have euro, what is stopping Africa from having an Afro? If we are not able to even trade, then how do we survive? So Africans, governments really need to know that unity is power, and that they need to unify their forces so that they can serve African citizens better in a more meaningful and sustainable manner.
And then lastly, the globe. As the world, what should we be doing?
The citizens of the world need to understand that we all live in the same pain. And when one goes down, it might not affect you today, but you might be the next victim. So that's why issues of climate change need to be a global, common interest and common issue that we all need to work together to address together. It is critical. And it has been manifested during this pandemic, the COVID pandemic, that the whole world went on lockdown. It affected everybody. And climate catastrophes and the effects of climate change are also hitting us like that. So that's why we have to address global challenges in a unified and with common interests, because we are all intertwined. Either we like it or not, we are sharing this earth, and we must protect it together. If we protect the earth, we are protecting our lives and our survival on the earth.
Thank you so much for that. When you say that, what you said about we'll all be affected, it reminds me of something that I think I heard someone from an island state. It's a phrase that they use sometimes that says, in terms of climate change, in terms of drowning, they're like, we will be the first, but we will not be the last. Yeah. Muhammed, thank you so much for making time to speak to me.
Thank you for having me. Organize.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and please subscribe to the Sustain 267 podcast on whichever platform you're listening from so you can get a notification whenever we put out new episodes, and remember to give us a rating so we reach more people. And a huge thank you to the Sustain 267 patrons for their financial support that has made this episode possible. If you don't know what Patreon is, it's basically a platform where you can support creatives to create content like this podcast. So if you appreciate the Sustain 267 podcast and have learned anything from it, feel it is necessary, and would love to contribute towards the production of future episodes, please become a Patreon from as little as $3 a month, and the link is in the episode notes. I am the host of Sustain 267 podcast, Bato Kilisitse, and the sound engineer is Maleho Makhoti. Let's connect on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on our handle @Sustain267 and continue the conversation. Take care.
Sustain 267.